The night Zara Cole walked into the wrong bar, ordered the wrong drink, and sat in the wrong seat, she had no idea she had just claimed the chair of the most dangerous alpha in the Northern Territory. She also had no idea he was about to let her keep it. Chapter 1. The Wrong Bar. The bar had no name on the door. That should have been Zara's first warning. Every bar in Coldwater had a name. A neon sign, a hand-painted board, something. This one had a door the color of dried blood and a single wolf-shaped iron knocker that someone had polished recently enough to catch the streetlight. She had been walking in the rain for 20 minutes, her phone was dead, and she needed somewhere dry to think. She went in. The inside was warm and dim and smelled like wood smoke and something older and stranger that she couldn't place. The bar itself was long and dark-stained, the kind that had absorbed decades of spilled drinks and quiet conversations. Maybe a dozen people occupied the space, spread out in the specific way of people who wanted room, who were used to having it. Every single one of them looked up when she entered. Not the casual glance of a new face in a regular bar. This was assessment, fast, thorough, and then deliberately withdrawn, like they'd each made a decision and returned to their drinks. The bartender, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of watchful stillness that belonged in a watchtower, studied Zara for 3 full seconds. "You lost?" the bartender asked. "Temporarily," Zara said, because she had never admitted to being lost in her life. "Can I get a whiskey? Neat. Whatever you have that isn't going to embarrass us both." Something moved in the bartender's expression, not unfriendliness, closer to surprise, and then a reluctant appreciation for the answer. "Sit anywhere, except the end," she gestured, and Zara looked toward the far end of the bar, 2 empty stools, separated from the others by a gap of about 3 feet that everyone seemed to have agreed on without discussion. The end stool at the absolute end had something on the bar in front of it, a glass half full of amber liquid, and a phone face down on the dark wood. Occupied, then. She took the second stool, the one beside the gap, because she was still wet from the rain and her feet hurt, and it was the nearest seat to the door, and she sat down and put her bag on the bar and did not look around. She felt the shift in the room a full 30 seconds before the door opened. It was atmospheric, a collective adjustment, everyone in the bar straightening by a fraction, conversations dropping by half a volume, the way a room changes when something with mass enters it. Then the door, then him. He was tall, that was the first thing, and it was followed immediately by the second thing, which was that tall did not begin to cover it. He was built like architecture, like something that had been designed with structural purpose in mind. Dark coat, dark hair, jaw that could have been cut from the same stone as the bar. He moved through the room the way weather moved, not aggressively, not performing, just with the absolute certainty of something that had never needed to ask permission. He was looking at her seat. She realized 1 beat too late that she was sitting in the end stool, not the second stool, the end one. She'd miscounted. He stopped beside her. The bar was very quiet. "That's my seat," he said. His voice was low and even, and it landed in the room with the particular weight of a statement that was not a complaint, just information, delivered to someone who needed to have it. Zara Cole was a field medic in 3 conflict zones. She had talked down a man with a knife in a Glasgow hospital corridor. She had spent 4 years making herself small and quiet and invisible, and had sworn, after all of that, that she would never be small or quiet or invisible for anyone ever again. She looked up at him. His eyes were gray, not pale gray or washed-out gray, a deep, shifting gray, the color of a sky deciding whether to storm, and they were watching her with an expression she couldn't categorize, which was unusual, because she had a very complete internal catalog of expressions, and this one wasn't in it. "Then you should have been in it," she said. The bar held its breath.
And then something happened that by multiple accounts she would later hear from the pack members who were present, had never happened before in the 17 years that Cale Draven held the title of Alpha of the Northern Territory. He sat down beside her. "Fair enough," he said, and picked up his drink from the bar in front of her. Chapter 2. What He Smelled. Her name was Zara. He got that in the first 10 minutes. She was new to Coldwater, passing through, she said, which is how people who were running from something described it when they didn't want to admit they were running. She'd said it without defensiveness, which meant she'd decided not to be defensive about it, which was different. She was a nurse, she'd said, between positions. He'd said nothing about himself, which was normal. Nobody who came to this bar asked. They knew. But she didn't know, which meant she didn't know to ask, and there was something about talking to someone who had no idea what he was that Cale found, he searched for the word, restful. Nobody waiting for the Alpha to speak so they could calibrate their response. Nobody monitoring his face for signals. Just a woman with rain-damp hair and a direct manner of speaking, working her way through a whiskey and asking him, with genuine curiosity, what he did.
"Property," he said, which was true. "What kind?" "Most kinds." "That sounds either very boring or very illegal," she said. "Neither," he said, "mostly old." She'd accepted that with a small nod, like filing it away, and returned to her drink. He found himself watching her hands, how they moved, quick and precise, the kind of hands that were used to doing things under pressure. A scar across the back of her right hand, neat and old, from something sharp. A wrist that was finer than the rest of her suggested, which suggested she'd lost weight recently. He was cataloging. He knew it. He couldn't stop. The scent of her was doing something to his attention that he did not want to examine too closely. In 17 years as Alpha, he had met thousands of people. He had a highly developed, strictly controlled relationship with scent, the fundamental information system of his world, the way he read pack mood, tracked threat, assessed loyalty. He had trained himself to process scent as data, nothing more. Her scent was not processing as data. It was doing something else entirely, something that lived below the rational mind, below cataloging and assessment, something his grandmother had described in the old stories she'd told him when he was young, before he'd decided those stories were mythology. He picked up his glass and looked at it and put it down without drinking. "You keep looking at me like you're trying to figure something out," Zara said, without turning her head. He had not thought she'd noticed. That was unusual. He was not often unguarded. "I'm trying to determine," he said carefully, "whether you ended up in this specific seat on accident." "The seat I stole from you?" "Yes." "Rain, dead phone, nearest dry door," she said. "Pure accident." She finally turned to look at him directly, and her eyes were dark brown, almost black in the bar light, and absolutely unintimidated. "Are you a significant person?" Cale looked at her for a moment. "Not yet," he said. He ordered her another drink. She let him, which he understood was not something she did easily. They talked until the bar started to empty, and then past that, and she told him about field medicine in Syria, and he told her about the land his family had held for 2 centuries, and she laughed twice, really laughed, sudden and unself-conscious, and each time it hit him somewhere specific. When she finally stood to leave, he stood with her. "You don't have to do that," she said. "It's late. You don't know the town. I do." "I'm staying at the Birch House Inn," she said. "I know where it is." "The road between here and Birch House passes through Northgate territory after dark," he said. "Trust me when I tell you that you don't want to be on that road alone at midnight." She studied him with the frank assessment of someone who had spent years reading threat. "You're not a danger to me," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," he said. "Okay," she said, and it was the simplest trust he had ever been handed, and it terrified him completely.
Chapter 5. What He Wouldn't Say. He was in his chair. She took the one beside him and did not explain the 4-day gap, and he did not ask, which told her something about how he managed the things that mattered by giving them room. Petra set a whiskey in front of her without being asked. I know about Lena, Zara said, after the first drink had settled. She felt him go still beside her, not the controlled stillness he wore like armor, a different kind, unprepared stillness, caught off guard stillness. Petra, he said. Don't be angry with her. I would have found out eventually, and this way I didn't find out at a bad moment. She turned to look at him. I'm not bringing it up to make you talk about it. I'm bringing it up to tell you one thing, and then we don't have to speak about it again unless you want to. He looked back at her, carefully. I'm not looking for someone to save me, Zara said. I've done enough saving for this lifetime, professionally and otherwise. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm not a replacement. I'm not carrying grief of my own that I'm projecting onto you. I'm telling you this so that when you wonder, and you will wonder, it's a fair thing to wonder, you know where I actually stand. The bar was quiet around them. Where do you stand? He asked, and his voice had changed, the professional evenness gone, something more direct in its place. I don't know yet, she said, but I'm here. That's where I stand. He looked at her for a long time. She would have liked you, he said. His voice was very quiet. Lena would have found you entertaining as hell. Zara felt the weight of that, what it cost him to say it, what it meant that he had. Tell me one thing about her, Zara said. Whatever you want. He was quiet for a moment. She made terrible coffee, he said finally. Every single day for 6 years I drank terrible coffee because she was so proud of the process. She had this system. The system produced undrinkable coffee. I never told her. Zara laughed, softly, then more fully. How bad? She asked. Like boiled mud with ambitions, he said, and the corner of his mouth moved, the first real smile she'd seen from him, small and involuntary and completely unguarded, and it cracked something open in the room. I make excellent coffee, Zara said. I believe you, he said. Come over tomorrow. I'll prove it. He looked at her. Yes, he said.
Chapter 8. What She Chose. He showed her everything. Over 3 days and 100 miles of territory, on foot, in his truck, on horseback through the parts of the forest where roads didn't go, he showed her the land his family had held for 2 centuries and the people who lived on it, and the specific, daily, unglamorous work of protecting something you loved. She met the satellite families. She met the old wolves who remembered the territory before the treaty. She met children, 3 of them still years from their first change, who were being raised in the knowledge of what they were, so that when it came, it was not a catastrophe. She helped with 2 medical situations that the pack's own healer, an older wolf named Dax, who had trained as a field medic in a previous life, was grateful to have the extra hands for. She sat in on a council meeting and said nothing, and understood by the end of it that the territorial dispute with Northgate was more complex and more dangerous than Kael had initially framed for her. He's been building towards something, she said, that night on the cottage porch. Voss. The border incidents, the provocation at the meeting. He's not trying to take the land, not directly. He's trying to destabilize you before he moves. Kael looked at her. Yes, he said, that's our read too. And the something he's building toward? A formal challenge. Kael's voice was even. Alpha to alpha for the combined territory, which she'd only issue when he was sure he could win. Yes, so we need to make sure he can't win, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. You said we, he said. I know what I said. She turned to look at him fully in the porch light. Kael, I've been trying to find the part of this I can't accept. I've been thorough about it. I've sat with the grief part, and the danger part, and the fact that you're a werewolf, and I'm going to have to explain that to my mother eventually. He exhaled, and it was very nearly a laugh. I've sat with all of it, she continued, and I've found the part I can't accept is not being here. That's where I ended up. Zara, He reached across the space between their chairs and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the carefulness of someone handling something irreplaceable. "I told you the bond would be permanent. I meant it." "I understand permanent," she said. "I chose medicine. The whole point is that you keep showing up." "You know I'll have to fight Voss," he said. "At some point. It's coming." "I know." She covered his hand with hers where it rested against her cheek. "And I'll be here when it's done." "What if—" "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't give me the worst case. We don't plan for worst cases. We plan for success and build in contingencies. Plan for winning." He looked at her for a long time. Then he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then her temple. Then, slowly, finding her eyes for a question, she answered by not moving, her mouth. It was not the first time she'd been kissed. It was the first time she'd felt it decide something. Chapter 9. The Night It Broke. Voss moved in November. Not a formal challenge, something more dangerous than that. 3 Northgate wolves crossed the southern boundary in the night and took 2 young pack members, Finn and a girl named Sasha, who were running the South Meadow Trail. They left them at the border with a message. The message was not about land. Zara was at the pack house when they brought Finn in. She had her medical kit on the table before anyone asked, and she worked on him in silence. And Finn, 16, brave, trying very hard not to cry, held her hand while she worked on his shoulder and didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said to tell Dravan that the humans next. The room was very still. Zara kept her hand steady. She had been trained for this, not this specifically, but the part where you got bad news in the middle of doing something important and you kept your hand steady anyway because someone needed you to. "How bad is the shoulder?" asked Zara. "It'll heal," he said, with the slightly confused pride of a young wolf discovering his body's capabilities. "Faster than you deserve for being out after dark," Petra said from behind Zara, and her voice was steady too, but her hands, when she put them on Finn's unwounded shoulder, were shaking slightly. Kael was across the room. He had his back to everyone, which Zara understood now was what he did when he needed a moment, when the alpha needed to be somewhere the pack couldn't see his face while he managed what was on it. She finished with Finn. She sent him to a couch with heat packs and very specific instructions. She cleaned her hands. She crossed the room. "Kael," she said quietly. He turned. She had never seen his face like this. Every professional layer stripped, the control not abandoned, but overwhelmed. Beneath it, something raw and old and terrible. "I should have," she started. "No," she said. "I should have moved faster on the border. I should have—" "No," she said again, putting both hands on his jaw, looking up at him from 2 feet away. "Kael, I've been trying to find the part of this I can't accept. I've been thorough about it. I've sat with the grief part and the danger part and the fact that you're a werewolf and I'm going to have to explain that to my mother eventually." He exhaled, and it was very nearly a laugh. "I've sat with all of it," she continued, "and I've found the part I can't accept is not being here. That's where I ended up." "Zara," he reached across the space between their chairs and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the carefulness of someone handling something irreplaceable. "I told you the bond would be permanent. I meant it." "I understand permanent," she said. "I chose medicine. The whole point is that you keep showing up." "You know I'll have to fight Voss," he said. "At some point. It's coming." "I know," she covered his hand with hers where it rested against her cheek. "And I'll be here when it's done." "What if—" "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't give me the worst case. We don't plan for worst cases. We plan for success and build in contingencies. Plan for winning." He looked at her for a long time. Then he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then her temple, then, slowly, finding her eyes for a question, she answered by not moving, her mouth. It was not the first time she'd been kissed. It was the first time she'd felt it decide something.
Chapter 11. The Bond. The formal bonding happened 3 weeks later. It was not a wedding, though it shared certain architectural qualities. The gathering of people who mattered, the particular charged quality of a moment being marked, the way time slowed to accommodate something important. It was held at the old stone, which had been cleaned and dressed with winter greenery, under a sky that had been clear for precisely the first time in a week, as if the weather had read the occasion. Petra performed it in the old form, words she told Zara privately with 300 years old, wolf tongue and human tongue alternating, because the old alphas had known that the mate bond worked in both directions. Finn was in the front row, arms still in a sling, and he was crying, which he denied loudly and at length for the rest of the evening. Zara wore her own clothes, which felt right. She had not come to this place to become something other than herself. Cale held her hands through the entire ceremony, and when it came to the moment where the old form asked for declaration, he looked at her with the gray eyes she had stopped trying to read and started simply trusting, and said, in the plain, honest words of a man who had been closed for 11 years and had decided to be open again, "I had given up on this. I was not looking for it, and I had decided that was fine. And then you walked into my bar in the rain and told me I should have been in my own seat, and I would like to spend the rest of my life, which is longer than you planned for, but I hope acceptable, being grateful that you said it." Someone in the pack made a sound that was definitely crying. "It's acceptable," Zara said, and then, because she was herself, "Finn, I can hear you." "I'm not," Finn started. "You are," said the entire pack, more or less simultaneously. Laughter, the kind that came after held breath, that came from relief and joy and the complicated warmth of community. Cale pulled her close and kissed her, and the pack made the resonant sound again, fuller this time, and Zara felt it in her chest, not frightening, not overwhelming, just present, like a hand on the shoulder that said, "You are here, you are known, you belong here." She had spent 4 years looking for where she belonged. She had found it in the wrong bar on a rainy night. She found she didn't mind at all. Epilogue. 1 year later. The bar still had no name on the door. She'd asked Petra about it in the first week before she knew what the bar was, and Petra had said it had never had a name and probably never would because names were for places that needed to be found. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means the right people always find it," Petra had said. Zara thought about that now, on an October night exactly 1 year from the original Tuesday, sitting in the end stool, her stool as it had quietly become, with a whiskey she'd ordered herself and the comfortable noise of the pack around her. The Northgate Treaty had been signed 6 months ago. Not submission. Cale had not demanded submission, which Petra had told her was unusual, and Cale had told her was simply pragmatic. A treaty with real terms that gave both territories security. The border markers were restored and undisputed, and nobody had moved them since. Finn had his control, mostly. He still occasionally needed reminding in moments of high emotion, which he handled with increasing grace. Cole, who she'd patched up the first night at the pack house, was in medical school. She was writing him a reference. She was also running a trauma support program for young shifters navigating first change, which had started as an informal conversation with Dax and become a real program with 16 participants and a waiting list, because it turned out that the tools for managing shock and fear in a human body translated remarkably well to a body that was doing something unprecedented and terrifying and exhilarating and trying to do it with dignity. She had called her mother in September. The conversation was extraordinary.
She was working through the logistics of the follow-up visit when the stool beside her was occupied, and she looked up from her phone. Cale set his glass on the bar in front of him. "You're in my seat again," he said. "Funny, I remember something about possession being 9/10. You remember incorrectly," he said, and sat down beside her in the second stool, close enough that their shoulders touched, in the way they always were now, proximate, easy, the habit of people who had found their natural distance. "How was the northern boundary run?" she asked. "Quiet. Good quiet." He looked at her. "You have a planning face. What are you planning?" "My mother wants to come for Christmas," she said. "I'm working out the approach." For telling her everything, she said. The territory, the pack, all of it. "She'll handle it," Cale said. "How are you confident about that? You've never met her." "She raised you," he said simply. "She'll handle it." Zara looked at him for a moment, the gray eyes in the bar light, steady and certain, and the full weight of a year behind them, everything they'd built and fought for and chosen, the mornings and the difficult evenings, and the pack at the table, and the land they walked together in the blue hour before dark. "You know," she said, "for a man who spent 11 years closed, you've become remarkably optimistic." "He has good reason," he said. Petra set 2 whiskeys on the bar without being asked. "Anniversary," she said, and walked away before either of them could respond. Zara picked up her glass. Cale picked up his. "To the wrong seat," she said. "To the wrong seat," he said. They drank. Around them the pack was loud and warm and entirely, completely home. Outside, the autumn rain had started again. Neither of them planned to go anywhere.